First, I want to level set with the room and make sure everyone's on the same sheet of music. So kick us off, sir, if you don't mind, on what is experimentation. Give us some of the terminology and make sure that we really know what it is that we're talking about this morning.
That's great. Thanks, Megan. First off, no, it's great. The one good thing about taking General Rainey's time slot is people couldn't exit the room before the fireside chat at 10 o'clock. So we've got a full house to get everyone excited about experimentation. So I'm Dave Hodne. I'm the director of the Futures and Concept Center and also a deputy of the Army Futures Command. If you want to send me cards and letters, please don't send them to Austin. I'm at Fort Eustis, Virginia, with my team there. So, and I've got
that's a complaint. Send those to Austin.
Yeah. So I'm at Fort Eustis, Virginia, and there we do all things requirements for the Army, concepts and experimentation. And we're here to talk about experimentation. So we just came off Project Convergence Capstone 5, Part A. And we talked a lot, General Rainey talks a lot about persistent experimentation, which occurs throughout the year. Right now, we're on day 18 of what's essentially a 75-day sprint that will go through May, and that's defined by Project Convergence Part A that just concluded at the National Training Center, Project Convergence Part B that will conduct forward in Indo-PACOM. The difference with what we did with the joint portion of Project Convergence this year is our experimentation venue will encompass the geographical region as far west as the Philippines, as far east as Tahiti, and as far north as Japan, and as far south as Australia. So certainly we're excited about what's coming in the next few weeks in that. And then the third component of our experimentation is the Army's Title X War Game. It used to be called Unified Quest, Unified Challenge Series War Games. Now it's called Future Studies Program. And that will take us right to May 21st. And we'll wrap up before Memorial Day weekend and obviously the Army's 250th birthday celebration. So to your question, Megan, experiments are not exercises. Exercises focus on today's readiness. They have clear training objectives. They're today's formations with their capabilities. There's an element of free play, test the full range of capabilities, and allows leaders and echelons to make decisions to challenge problems and make sure they're skilled in their mission essential tasks. Experiments are focused on experimentation objectives, not training objectives. They're also focused on future readiness, and there's a little bit of the learning demands. Unlike a free play and exercise in an experiment, there's really controlled environments to make sure we can test our hypotheses, make sure we can get the learning, achieve the learning demands and answer the questions we're seeking to pursue. So the experiments we're hosting are really important to the future readiness of our Army, and I'm certainly proud to be a part of it.
Absolutely. So from your perspective too, from the joint modernization, what's your role in the experimentation? Kind of add on to its critical nature of it.
Sure, thanks, Megan, and great to be here. We at Joint Modernization Command do most of the kind of large scale in the dirt type experiments. Project Convergence Capstone is the kind of most known one. As General Hodne had said, Scenario 8 is concluded at National Training Center. So we really convene the team is one way I look at it. This portion that we did at National Training Center had about 4,000 participants from across the Joint Force. And in order to put that together, we need a lot of help. And we had coordination from NASA to the NSA and from ASALT to the Air Force headquarters. You name it, they were out there trying to help put it together. The real secret, I think, is that our cross-functional teams and our capability developers from our centers of excellence are really the ones that are at the locus of understanding whether or not the technologies and the operating concepts we brought together are performing as we anticipated, and then finding what we can learn from that and making sure that that gets fed back into the machinery that is delivered in transformation and contact.
Well, and you hit on something about the team, and I wanted to pull that thread a little bit, because one of the things that stood out to me is when we talk about experimentation, it's not just about the technologies and making sure that they work. You're also bringing in, the operations centers, all the forms you have to fill out, you name it.
Yeah.
What else goes into it from?
Yeah. So unlike in past years, and I'll steal General Hodne's line that it was like sticks lanes in the desert, where we had a bunch of kind of discrete experiments all occurring. This year it looked actually a lot more like a operation would, or National Training Center rotation would. We had a joint forcible entry, we had an attack, and we had a defense. And so we were able to execute that from the core echelon, 18th Airborne Corps, all the way down to the platoon level. And to put that together is much more than just a normal National Training Center rotation, as you might imagine. We had forces from all corners of the Army. And then we had folks like, because since it was the Corps, we had to fight in the deep. So we had the Air Force up at the Nevada Testing Training Range in Nellis Air Force Base. We had the maritime component off the coast of San Diego and San Clemente Island, which included everything from SEAL Team 1 to Army and Air Force Special Operations Forces to even the 11th MEU from the Marine Corps. So if we don't bring all those together, we can't really test whether or not the capabilities we've assembled are going to allow us to meet our warfighting needs for the future from the core down.
So you hit on something, and I'm going to flip the next question to you, sir. It sounds like we are adapting and changing the way that we do experimentation. So we used to have big singular events, and we've really evolved. And part of the theme for this conference is continuous transformation. So how else have we changed experimentation to keep up and really kind of meet that continuous transformation spirit?
Yeah, thanks, Meagan. So you talked about the core and below. So I'll start with Project Convergence and the adjustments we've made there. So I was a CFT director, Soldier Valley CFT for the first Project Convergence. That was essentially a bottom-up experiment. CFT directors were pursuing capabilities and the solutions we were pursuing. We realized if we didn't coordinate with each other, we would actually potentially go in different directions. So Ross Kaufman actually gets the credit. He was the next gen combat vehicle CFT director, also former COG at the NTC. He's the one who said, hey, we need to probably bring our stuff together to make sure in the Army, the CFT directors could link sensors and shooters with the technology we're pursuing. Wally Rugen, Future Vertical Lift CFT, John Radford, who's the Long Range Precision Fire CFT, and I, of course, was pursuing capabilities. So that's what converging our capabilities was, where we developed that. That was the first one. We've now done 5 Project Convergences. You can see the evolution. The second one, we partnered with Marines and Air Force, elements that were doing their own, pursuing their own, modern capabilities or modernized capabilities. So they joined us, and Coalition of the Willing. The third year, we partnered with 5 Eye Allies. So now we had, some joint capacity and allied participation. The fourth and fifth year, we elevated to combatant command participation. And the difference between the fourth and the fifth year, again, it was 6 lanes in the desert. For the NTC portion, where we looked at capabilities isolated from each other. So we had a medical lane to evaluate medical capabilities. We had a human machine integration, like small scale attack. That was really battalion and below. And at the joint portion of it, we had all of the joint headquarters that Zach described, Indo-PACOM, components, etc., all sitting on Camp Pendleton in tents that were 50 yards apart from each other. So if we had issues in the execution of our command and control, we could walk across the dirt and just talk to each other and then ask why the ones and zeros weren't passing. So that was last year. This year, the convergence still occurred where we integrated warfighting systems, but I think that the bigger convergence was centered around the core, U.S. Army Corps Joint Task Force Headquarters. So Part A, core and below. Can the Corps conduct data-centric command and control from the core level JTF all the way down to the edge being the rifle squad on point? Part B is core and above, all the way to the core JTF integrating in with combatant command, and we're going to do it across the geographical distances I described. There won't be any walking across the street from Tahiti to the Philippines to make sure the ones and zeros. So assured data, assured communications, tactical, operational, strategic distances. So if we can converge that data-centric command and control from the combatant command to the core or the core to the squad, we can converge that capability from the squad all the way to the combatant command. We can be far more effective. So that's how we've adjusted. If people are wondering why Part A, why Part B, why we've done that, we partnered in the last 2 with the OSD's CDAO, the Chief Data Artificial Intelligence Analytics Office. They're working to combine joint all-domain command and control solutions. That partnership with the experimentation series called GUIDE, Global Information Dominance Experiment. We try to save you from acronym hell as you go through that, but we partnered with them. That was GUIDE 9. that yielded the min viable product. Again, Joint Modernization Command, one of a kind organization convening this Army-hosted joint experiment, yielded the min viable product for CJAD C2, and that's what we're running Part B on that architecture. So I'm really excited about Part B and solving those problems.
So if I were to say it back to you, it sounds like data is king, and we're really flipping the script so that we are focusing on how data can drive that connectivity at every single echelon.
Yeah, I'm gonna
that
quote
sounds
Pat
game
Ellis.
changer.
Yeah, I'll quote Pat Ellis. He's the one who, next to me, he's the command and control cross-functional team director. It's, if you it's about moving data, and if you can move data, you can move your voice. So voice over internet protocol. So think traditional radios, not having to do that and moving our voices via data.
So you're talking about how we're now running it at echelon. That's fantastic. You've talked a little bit about it requires everyone coming together across the joint services or coalition partners, and we want to practice like you want to compete, right? So talk to me a little bit about how we not only have we changed the way that we're structuring our experimentation, but we're fighting a different fight now. We've been in the desert for a while. We've learned a lot from Ukraine. We're going out to Indo-PACOM. How are we also adapting experimentation to be in those environments? Talk a little bit more about the world aspect of it.
Yeah, I'll take that, Zach. I mentioned Future Studies program, the Title 10 War Game. We've been doing that last year. I spoke. I graduated from the Warriors Corner at the Fireside Chat. I was down in the hallway there, and I talked about the taxonomy of experimentation. I did that with my teammate Steph Aher. She was my director of concepts. 4 years of experimentation on the Army warfighting concept and the Title 10 War Game, and we've certainly learned a few fundamental aspects of how we're going to fight that shape our experimentation. So the first, we know, it's back to your comment about data. We know we have to fight to conduct command and control. We can't assume that we're just going to be able to execute command and control, denied environments, etc. So our ability to conduct C2, communicate with assured communications over tactical, operational, strategic distances. We also have to counter the enemy's ability to command and control. That happens, offensively, targeting the enemy's ISR, their reconnaissance complex, targeting their C2 nodes, targeting their strike complex. That goes without saying. That's one sure way to counter their command and control. The other is blue actions, friendly actions we take to deceive, to obscure in all domains, to make sure the enemy doesn't understand exactly what we're doing. So C2 and counter C2 is something we've got to do. The other thing we've learned in the Future Studies program is that traditional fire and maneuver is insufficient. We have to conduct what's called cross-domain fires and expanded maneuver. Cross-domain fires are not joint fires. They're not fires that are delivered by other services. We still are going to fight as a joint force. The Army plays a critical role in that. But these are Army fires delivered in other domains. Land fires against maritime targets, land fires against space targets, all domains, cross-domain. Commanders at echelon have to be comfortable with that. And even platoon leaders today, Red Air back in the day was looking at enemy manned helicopters and aviation assets. And then there was a period in time where platoon leaders and company commanders frankly weren't looking above them. Now, every platoon leader that's watching, feeds of fights in Ukraine know they have to look above them. And platoon leaders know cross-domain fires, their ability to deliver land fires and defeat aerial targets is important. Expanded maneuver, the changing character of war, expanded maneuver, time, space, and purpose. The traditional area of operations is going to look different in multiple dimensions. So platoon leaders operating unmanned systems in what used to be the company commander's AO, the area of influence or area of interest is now absolutely something that someone, the lower echelon can deliver effects. So expanded maneuvers. Another lesson we've learned, and the last one, Meagan, is formation-based layer protection. We can't assume we're going to be able to, we have to fight our way to operate and protecting our formations at every echelon, and the aspects of it, again, core and below, formation-based layered protection at the core level, looks different than formation-based layer protection for a platoon or a squad. It looks different for how our sustainment formations deliver, commodities in contested logistics environments. So, certainly profound lessons that shape how we have to experiment.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'll flip the question over to you. I know when we were speaking in the green room, we talked about kind of how we are experimenting around the world. We're bringing in partners, we're bringing in the other services. You mentioned Army capabilities, but that's only a fraction of the fight. So tell me a little bit more about what you're seeing and how you're thinking about this differently.
Sure. So the other services are in the same journey that we're in, and that's the reason, first and foremost, we partner with the equivalent of Futures Commander or FCC for those services. But when I look at, for example, the ability in the Pacific for all the services to be able to put their sensors together so it doesn't matter who is detecting a threat, the best positioned service or capability will be in effect on that. And in other cases, it takes a combination of effects to get a really tough to target enemy force. Because we're doing that, we can't all go in the same direction, in separate directions, much like General Hodne said when they first started Capstone. That was just the Army trying to solve that problem. Now we're trying to do that across the Joint Force. The Special Operations Force is another great example. Great partnership this year with AUSA, the Special Operations Command from the Army. They were not off doing their own excursion. They were both in the Pacific, I guess it was the Pacific, San Clemente Island, but also in the National Training Center in the Deep. And they were actually facilitating what turned out later to be during the attack, a breach. So we had a fully autonomous breach that was done, and part of that was at the right time hitting certain enemies' capabilities, denying them their ability to use satellites, those types of things. And so recognizing that we're going to have to, any number of scenarios that could come up that we'll have to fight across services, across kind of niche capabilities that don't necessarily combine on a day-to-day basis.
So I think traditionally experimentation has had a little bit of a flair of we need to do a demonstration for senior leadership and show them what we're capable of. But I'm getting the sense that that's changing. We're actually trying to kick the tires on things and really test if they're working. Yeah. How do we measure that? What are we getting wrong? What are we getting right? What are we learning?
Yeah. I joked, if you only came out one day to this last Project Convergence, a lot of people, the chief was there one day with the new secretary, and you would think we're running a little bit of an AUSA there, because we do show all these different capabilities and the things we've been doing, but that belies the complexity and the integrated nature of what the actual experiment is. And so, yes, we do have a lot of capabilities that are sort of on demonstration and that we have to have something physical to experiment with. This is not a conceptual exercise. And so that has to happen. But what really we're trying to do is figure out, are the things we're asking for in our future course, do they meet the requirements that we're going to need, the capabilities we're going to need to be able to fight in the future? And in many cases, we're adjusting, I think just our first pass over after Capstone Scenario A was there's about 35 requirements documents that need to be updated based on things that we saw there that we got to tweak them in such a way that when we do go to procure these things for the Army at large, that we're getting after the right sets of capabilities. That's just one example of kind of how that's changed.
Can I add to that? So Zach referred, it said it felt like an NTC rotation. I think it was like an NTC rotation times 10. Having been a senior trainer at the National Training Center as division commander and coaching the brigade combat team through that, this one was core and below. So I know divisions are in the dirt now for CTCs, but 18th Airborne Corps, 82nd Airborne Division, and multiple brigades. First, 11 AD and 1A2 from the 82nd were out there. But in addition to being a senior trainer and organizing and coalescing around integrated warfighting systems, we also have to make sure our experimentation learning demands were met. So in some cases, when a unit didn't necessarily employ the technology in the manner the capability developer envisioned, some of it's like, okay, that's great, we need to write a requirement document or adjust it because we got some great feedback. But in some cases, we had to make sure we realized the learning demand to test that hypothesis. Interestingly enough, the Secretary and the Chief came when I think it was like 40-mile-an-hour winds, and the weather was
really served up the weather that day.
Right, so we had to actually, they came on a day where we had to nimbly adjust our experimentation to make sure we can meet those learning demands and the weather that preceded it. I think we saw all 4 seasons in NTC to include snow for a couple of days, so it was certainly exciting times. But we can make adjustments And to your question about things that might have fell short, the interesting thing, when we did the 6 lanes in the desert, some things worked exactly as intended. But when we had to do it, as an integrated warfighting system and actually have them fight in, a real Op 4, 11th ACR was employing the full weight of their capabilities against those formations. Some things actually, when everything was put together in a fight, we realized it might have fell short.
Yeah, just one example that comes to mind, when we did the joint forcible entry, and we had done portions of this last year, we were kind of like, yeah, maybe move some stuff there ahead of time. This year it was done by air assault, by helicopter. So we had to move 2 battalions worth of combat power and this technology, one, first the 504th, the Red Devils from the 82nd Airborne Division, and 2 Royal Yorks from the British Army. They had a lot of technologies that are not, that were foreign to them, but we know they're helpful in that type of an environment. So now we're getting feedback from battalion commanders, brigade commanders, division commanders, and their staffs about, well, how would I prioritize this? Does a robot go on the very first helicopter that goes in? We had a technology called Joint Forcible Entry Radar, something that gives a commander on the ground or the Joint Forcible Entry an air picture. So this is a battalion commander now that has an air picture out in a pretty good distance. So that takes up space, that takes operators, but it was a critical thing. So, what are the trade-offs that have to be made? And that's just one example of many that we get that feedback from, and then we can just, maybe there's a different form factor that's necessary. Maybe it needs to communicate a different way because the transport's not available, et cetera.
So you're bringing up something I thought was really interesting. So I had the pleasure, I'll call it, to experience all 4 seasons out the box. But what struck me is how the large number of partners that are required to get this done. So we have industry here in the room, you had commercial tech companies, you had your industrial base that has the operational context, you had contracting staff. It was fascinating to see. What role should industry take in this new way of experimenting the frequency? And it sounds like it's okay to bring stuff that might need tweaking and fail, whereas before that might not have been the case.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question, Meagan. So, we want you to be on this journey with us. So, and we have made adjustments. So I talked about the C2 and counter C2, cross-domain fires, expanded maneuver, formation-based layer protection. The way we experiment right now, and last year when I, talked to the Warriors Corner about the taxonomy experimentation, I referenced the Army-focused warfighting experiments. Many folks are familiar with the experiments that occur at centers of excellence, things like AUE, which is the Army Expeditionary Warrior Experiment, SMAX, the Sustainment Modernization Experiment, and MFIX, the Maneuver Fires Integrated Experiment, Fort Sill, Vanguard, the Intelligence, they were COE focused because we were looking at capabilities in warfighting functions. Now we've got to look at capabilities and how they integrate across warfighting systems. So in fiscal year 26, the next year, we've reorganized how we're going to do those experiments. So we'll start the year with our Title 10 war game, like we do every year in November. We'll start that. The first experiment will be the C2 and counter C2 experiment. That'll be in the early spring time frame. It's built around the foundation that was Vanguard. Yuma, Arizona provides exceptional, range capabilities that allow us to test the full range of C2 and counter C2 capabilities. And that'll be essentially organized from the theater to the brigade level. So if you have technologies that are in the C2, counter C2 at those echelons and want to participate in that experiment, that's where that occurs. The next one is the cross-domain fires experiment. So where that was traditionally, MIFIX, the Maneuver Fires Integrated Experiment, Fort Sill, cross-domain fires, all manners of fires, launched effects, rocket cannon, and all these are live and in sim, by the way. That'll occur at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, after the C2, counter C2, SIFWE, AWE, which will expand to what's called the expanded maneuver, and that'll occur at Fort Benning. That'll be in the spring time frame, the April time frame, and that will also include, expand launched effects, autonomous systems, human machine integrated formations, and layered on top of all of them will be formation-based layer protection. So we know we've got the aspects of formation-based layer protection from the higher echelons will look different in terms of air defense systems, survivability systems, our approach to that, to the brigade and below at Fort Benning will look different. We'll then go to we do 2 FSPs a year. We'll do the second Future Studies program. We'll be able to incorporate the learning that occurred in those 3 concept-focused experiments. And then the capstone convergence event will occur in the summer. So convergence right now occurred in the spring, and like AUSA starts today at Fort Benning. So we did a lot of the things that it's just, we've got some adjustments to make. I think it'll help us out, it'll help industry out. With a more coherent approach to our experimentation.
And for the industry partners that are looking to support these types of experiments, I think the best way in is still the folks that you know and love, our capability developers, our cross-functional teams, the people at the centers of excellence. It's going to be a lot more focused. I did a talk in Austin some months ago, and in prep for that, I was looking up for kind of where the requests were that we were putting out for those, and they're all over the place. Some are in SAM.gov, some are in some other bespoke databases. So there's also an effort to kind of consolidate the kind of call for proposals that will meet the needs based on the learning demands that we have. So I think that's going to be a lot more coherent starting in FY26, and those events then will help us inform what we're going to do in the big capstone one in July, and make sure that we've got the capabilities that are really helping us meet those needs.
Yeah, and I think that's. I could not double down more on pay attention to those things, because all this is in the spirit of continuous transformation. So the frequency, the ability to not just adapt the systems, but even our programmatic, so that we can move with that speed. That will be important to take note of, because it's changing, and it's changing fast. Now, I wanted to kind of ask the question a little bit differently. You listed out some fantastic areas for industry to be involved, but 2030 shows up tomorrow. Everyone panic. Where do we have a ways to go? And what are the biggest opportunities that you think we haven't yet tackled?
I think, energy solutions. I think, we described the autonomy, all things autonomy, unmanned systems, communications systems. So I think what we'll see certainly in the expand maneuver and cross-domain fires experimentation, we'll certainly see, any help in that area would certainly be important. Dynamic spectrum management is certainly, again, when we put all of those systems together on the battlefield, integrated warfighting systems, and saw robots, we're not going to get any more spectrum, and saw how units had to on the fly, the paragraph 5 command and signal paragraph I wrote as a young lieutenant, succession of command and red and green star clusters. Today's command and signal paragraph in terms of dynamic spectrum management, when your systems are going to have access to the spectrum, our ability to manage that will be certainly critical.
Okay, same question.
Yeah, I think, and there's a separate panel that is going to be hosted on next generation command and control, but the future is unlimited there in terms of what types of applications people can bring to the fight. And it's an extensible open architecture. We had graduates of the software factory, AFC software factory, embedded as part of operational data teams in 18th Airborne Corps headquarters, and those smart captains and sergeants were writing code to make use of the data that was being brought into next generation command and control. And so there's going to be some level of applications that industry is going to have to help out with on those. I'll double down on the spectrum thing. We spent months and months and months maximizing the amount of spectrum. The reason I said NASA before is because they actually gave us some of their spectrum that they used to monitor deep space satellites. Voyager type stuff. So we did every single thing we could to wrest the last little bit of spectrum out. But the truth is, there is no formation in our military today that needs the type of spectrum like land operations in the 2030 to 2040 timeframe. And so the ability to secure the actual transport, the transmission of this data, and I'm not talking about ComSec, I'm talking about actually making sure that the communication itself is reliable, has multi-modes to move, doesn't use too much bandwidth when it doesn't need to use too much bandwidth. We've got a lot of work to do in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'm going to do a little bit of a rapid fire. Okay, so rapid, guys. We can do this. Most impactful thing you saw out at PCC5?
Next Gen C2. Watching an armored battalion conducting an attack across the central corridor in a distance that would have required any unit today to use 2 retrans sites, and they were able to, assure communication, cut through the OPFOR hot knife through butter because they could see the situational awareness that plotted the enemy locations, and platoon leaders, company commanders, battalion commander talking uninterrupted voice over internet. I think that was my rapid fire response.
Go check out the Warriors Corner.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
I'll tee up another Warriors Corner. Precision with logistics, so the precision sustainment. Tanks, M1 tanks, automatically sending their fuel, their ammunition status, and maintenance codes over existing transport methods as frequent as the commander wants them, all integrated into an app, in this case on Next Gen C2, that would let a commander see the exact status without a single log stat report having to go in, and then make decisions about what he can do with his fighting force and how he would need to sustain it.
I want to do another round.
Nice.
Direct support fires
Okay.
technology. Direct support fires technology, another Warriors Corner we need to sit in on today. Smaller form factor DevCom effort, rockets that, from the increase the rate of fire from the cannon to the launcher. Listen in on that Warriors Corner.
Okay.
No, I get another one if he gets another.
You're killing me.
Collaborative autonomy, also Warriors Corner on that later. So launched effects in UAVs, giving mission type orders, communicating together about who's going to detect it, who's going to verify it, who's going to kill it, all on their own. And a bonus one to end this round, a completely autonomous breach. So breaching.
An engineer can't talk.
Okay, fine.
I'm going to get fired about.
I'm going to drop your mic.
Watching the unit conduct a 2-lane breach of a wire mine obstacle, completely autonomous. The bulb system, which essentially deployed UAS systems. Goblin identified the minefield. UAS systems launched the enemy side of the minefield, worked their way backwards, and essentially a slice chart of a slice, which was a UAS that delivered a line charge. Anyone who's seen a MIC fire and a rocket might potentially go off center of where you intended to breach. A precision UAS delivering a line that then dropped the line charge filled with slurry and breached to connect that line charge. I've never seen that system before. Bottom-up innovation, 20th engineers, they've been working on that for some time now. Got to showcase that at Project Convergence, and Chris Beck and team from the Maneuver Sports Center. So
You're an honorary engineer now, sir. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay, so it wasn't rapid, but your enthusiasm is in all sincerity.
Sorry about that.
I do love it. So then I'll make it a little harder. Rapid. Name the most underrated emerging technology that will impact experimentation, and it can't be something you've already said.
I think I'm going to say DSFT, but for a different aspect. I talked about the speed of rocket fire. I think about the potential about rounds doing both offensive and defensive fires. Same missiles. That'll be groundbreaking.
All right, I'll stick on my sustainment bent, but this is something we probably need help with the industry on. Wearable sensors for folks that are injured. We've 2 years in a row we've been out there. I think we got some ways to go on that, but that's potentially a game changer for the people who are injured on the battlefield, to be able to transmit data and key vital signs back immediately to every level of care.
Awesome. Okay. If you had to be stationed at any base in the world permanently, where would it be?
Fort Eustis, Virginia. Love where you are.
Fort Bliss, Texas, home of the Joint Modernization Command and the 1st Airman Division.
All right. I was seeing if you all were paying attention this morning. Okay, I'm going to do just one last question because we've got a whole stack that will flip to you, but what if I not asked you what is something that you're really passionate about that you want to make sure the audience takes away from this talk?
One, integrating these systems together into a coherent warfighting experiment was invaluable. We'll continue to pattern all of our experimentation after that, and then do pay close attention to the Warriors Corner. I think every one of the CFT directors and the CDIs that are participating in those are going to absolutely highlight, this most recent Project Convergence experiment.
Fantastic.
When you take the work that was done for almost 4 years in the Future Studies program, which was, wargaming, some level of simulation, Conceptually, it works. We think it fits the mold for the 2040 timeframe for both capabilities that we'll have and that our adversaries will have. It's a whole other thing when you actually try to do those things. In a simulation, you know, the digits flow like they need to, for example. That doesn't always work when you're out in the dirt. And certainly when you're converging so many new capabilities, in some cases the people operating them aren't familiar with them, it's a huge challenge, which actually gives me a lot of hope because in a very relatively small amount of time, we were able to make those things work. And we were able to learn about where we still have gaps that we need to fill. And so I think as we continue through this experimentation journey, it's going to get more and more refined every year, and then we will be able to deliver those capabilities.
That's incredible. The speed, the learning, the iteration, it's really driving after continuous transformation, and it's just fantastic to see. I'm going to flip through these, and we've got a pretty hefty amount, so we'll make our way through, and that's all dependent on if I can read the handwriting. All right, are we ready? This one's for Lieutenant General Hodne. With the multitude of experiments you described, how is the Army assessing and integrating lessons and findings so the results are not sidelined or siloed?
Siloed. Yeah, I think that's the whole purpose of organizing in this manner. So it's not like right now it's siloed. And we need, like, we integrated Vanguard and Edge, 2 experiments. Edge was a CFT experiment, Future Vertical Lift CFT. Vanguard, as I described, was an Intel-seeded Intel COE experiment. They didn't occur exactly overlap, but there was like a week of each experiment that overlapped, so we forced that over, you know, we used an micro HAB curtain over essentially the state of Arizona that informed, you know, collaborative autonomous behaviors of Yuma privy rounds. That was like coordination we did in, you know, kind of at the last minute. Now, if we do a C2 counter C2 experiment that feeds a cross-domain fires experiment, that feeds an expand maneuver experiment, all of these capability developers will be participating at, you know, varying degrees. So it's to exactly do the opposite, it's to break down those silos.
Great. Okay, next question. When will we begin to see significant levels of contested log experimentation, and what is holding us back?
So there is no separate one. Those 3 examples that General Hodne gave, there is no separate logistics one, but this also goes back to your point about how do we not silo these types of things. That's kind of what was done before. And we found that quite a bit of sustainment tech that might have done really well, or maybe didn't look like it did that well when it was in an isolated experiment, when we brought it in and put it in the hands of the ultimate users, not just the logistics community, but also the commanders of our combat formations and their staffs. We learned a lot more. So I don't think there will always be some level of experimentation, like does this thing work or not? But the whole point is to bring them once they're mature enough and put them in an operational context that really lets us learn, like, is this really solving a problem that we have or not?
Can I add to that too? So, like I mentioned, you know, C2 counter C2 cross-domain fires, expanded maneuver, formation-based layer protection. Wrapped around all of that is intelligence and sustainment. So sustainment challenges, just like formation-based layer protection challenges, will vary based on the echelon you're talking about. The contested logistics CFT is a couple of years old. I think it's 2 years old, pretty soon, if not now. They actually demonstrated some pretty compelling contested logistics, you know, experimentation learning advantages between the autonomous tactical vehicle sustainment that was, you know, 1, transiting echelons in the desert, the NTC, and then 2, we've been working on how to integrate and, you know, partner with other autonomous systems to include, you know, fires, the autonomous multi-domain launcher. Watching that's pretty impressive.
And that sounds like that goes to what you're talking about, like continuously removing the silos. We're doing more integrated experimentation.
Yes.
That's
The sustainment's included in every one of those experiments.
fantastic. Okay. This one's the long one. So, okay, data centricity depends on a viable network. How are you addressing how the Army and the Joint Force fights through a day without the network, PNT, and digital command and control? By the way, I appreciate commute Z experimentation. Sorry, Mr. Pierce, I couldn't read that last word. But over to you all. Fantastic question.
Yeah, well, so again, tune into the Warriors Corner on Next Gen C2, but the watchword is cloud enabled, but not cloud dependent. And so they'll be able to describe about how we had edge nodes, how we had vehicles communicating with them, how it was able to resync to the cloud, et cetera. That's one piece of it. The other piece of it is to have resilient options for how we do connect our tactical formations. And again, this is kind of, again, an industry ask that we cannot be dependent on just, a low Earth orbit satellite or a terrestrial radio or, local, tactical 5G network. It has to be a little bit of all of those things to remain resilient. We, particularly when we're in the defense, we found that you have to be prepared to fight in a denied communications environment. The enemy knows where you are. You're in a defense. They will probably find a way to at least degrade, if not deny, your ability to C2.
Yeah, absolutely. And I got it, guys. I haven't had my second cup of coffee. Experimentation is not exercise. That's the comment that we appreciated. Okay. Next question here. We're gonna find one a little short. What role does mission engineering modeling and simulation play in current or future concept-focused experimentation?
Yeah, I think it's part of all of it. So again, a lot of it's, or a portion of it's live, and a portion of it will absolutely be in simulation. So we do modeling and sim throughout all aspects of our capability development.
Yeah, I would emphasize that one of the important parts of Project Convergence capstone is that much of this is live. So when I said we had the Nevada Test and Training Range in Nellis Air Force Base, those are live emitters, live, in some cases, exquisite enemy capabilities with live detection needs from all of the services, from space on down to ground forces. However, we can't, replicate the scale and the volume by using those emitters, and so simulation is what rounds out what we have. At the height of about a 6-hour period, the 18th Airborne Corps prosecuted about 200 targets. Obviously, those were not all real, but they did have to have the assets live or in sim to do the detection of them, decide what the right means to affect them was, and then collect the battle damage on them. So simulation is essential for what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. At that scale, very critical. Okay, I love this next question. A great rundown on Project Convergence series. What are a few examples of lessons learned with our allies and partners on the interoperability of experimentation in our sustainment and logistics enterprise? How do we follow up with our allies to reinforce that we will remain engaged?
Yeah, so I think one of the best quotes I heard from one of our Five Eye allies was on Project Convergence: if you miss a year, you're really far behind, and it's hard to catch up. So they recognize the importance of this. So right alongside the 11AD 237 Armor was the UK Robotics and Autonomous Systems Battle Group. They're going to expand they're seeking to expand their participation next year. The Next-Gen C2, their version of data-centric Next-Gen C2, they want to scale that as well so we can conduct that collaboration. We didn't do a lot of cross-ally sustainment drills. I don't really recall.
Yeah, the UK had a number of sustainment technologies out there that we gathered information from.
But they were sustaining their forces, we were sustaining ours with certain opportunities there. Things like air defense, 237 Armor, using some of the compelling, air defense technology, certainly found that they covered the entire central corridor with those capabilities, which included both Five Eye allies as well.
Yeah, I joked a couple days in that I think I said we're on day 2 of this experiment, and nobody from another country has complained that a cross-domain solution stripped out all the important information from a fires message, which is a huge growth. So I think we have taken the idea of a cross-domain solution, an NSA-approved box that takes information and decides what you can send to a partner on their network. We've taken that technology about as far as we can. We very much refined it. We have the Army and our partner nations experts there helping build that out. The next step is really more of a data-centric model. So there's something called the multinational interoperability protocol. So we advanced that while we were there. Again, you'll see all the technical folks during the Warriors Corner if you want to hear more about that. But we're absolutely making advances so that we can fight with our allies.
Fantastic. Okay, we have time for a couple more. This one's a little bit challenging question, but I've heard the answer woven throughout the day, so I'm excited to hear the answer. Experimentation begins with identifying capability gaps and requirements. Requirements demand resources. There's an obvious discontinuity between requirements and resources. How is FCC handling the acceleration of acquisition?
Yeah, so I think we've got to invest in lethality. We've got to invest in warfighting. So, one thing, we talk about capability gaps, for the students of how the Army runs, the CBA and TBA, the capability-based assessment, threat-based assessment, used to be like a 3-year process. We've now spin that in 9 months because we know we've got to move faster to be able to do that. Things, when you get an assessment that's 3 years old in today's day and age, it's already outdated in terms of what we're doing. So being at Eustis, linking our requirements, enterprise with our concept writers, with our experimentation, so they all feed each other, will naturally assist with making sure we're focusing on the right thing.
And you mentioned that you updated
45, yeah. So 35 documents. What I was going to say in addition to that is last year, Capstone 4, 3 or 4 of the technologies that we identified were such high potential and ready for prime time, if you will, that they're going to be in our Transformation and Contact 2.0, the second iteration. This year, we've identified 45 technologies that, of course, it's subject to funding and decisions, are at the level of maturity and usefulness to a Transformation and Contact unit that they could transfer over, and this next iteration is going to be more than just a brigade, which is what it's really been centered around. It'll include multi-domain task forces, brigade, division headquarters, etc.
And it was good. It was good. 1-1AD was not a tick unit, so just having them as a transforming contact unit, and just having them at the NTC, getting to actually see the compelling technology out there, it's pretty fun.
We're making that brigade go. The Army is sending that brigade back to NTC in October, and they will not have next generation command and control systems. They will have the kind of legacy, not even TIC capabilities. And so we're actually going to follow them very closely and learn. Yeah, what they did with is amazing. What they did with just about a week of training for the most part, and then 4 days of experimentation. Now they got to kind of go backwards, but.
Oh, that would be interesting. Maybe you can serve up the weather again. Sleet, snow, some rain. Okay, last question here. When and where will we address the mass attack IA-enabled Group 3 one-way attack UAS against Vision Corps LSCO emplacement maneuver forces? Did anyone understand that?
I think I got it. We got it. I think I got it. So it goes back to my offensive and defensive munition capability, affordable munitions that can address both. So, Bill Parker, Rory Crooks, the dynamic duo and Al Redford between the fires he did, the long-range precision fires, CFT, near miss and defense CFT, they're absolutely looking at exactly those kinds of things. I think 2 of the 3 of them are on board.
Yeah. And in Project Convergence Scenario B, out of the Pacific, it will not just be about which capabilities work, but how do you coordinate across all the people that can sense and shoot to make sure, for example, everybody's not shooting at the first thing coming at you, and we're wasting munitions and magazine depth, when there's a whole bunch more behind that.
Joint, combined, cross-service sensor netting, I think we're going to do that.
Okay. Brilliant. Well, everyone, first, give them a huge round of applause. I'm just going to say a sincere thank you. Your passion, what you all are working on, your deep, deep love for the warfighter and making sure they get the best capabilities, it truly is unmatched. You've teed up the day beautifully. Continuous transformation. We're driving readiness, lethality. We're doing that together. We're looking at data, NGC2. Pay attention, everyone. It's going to be a fantastic conference. Brilliant start to the day. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.